Yeah.
Okay, so I guess my question, well, I have like little side notes to discuss this question with the group. It's more for more of my understanding of what my part was. So my part, this was for set 2, so we all had to do like a different types of research, and mine was the neurolinguistic research. And so we all go to page 112. It has a brief description, right?
Where on page 112 is it?
It's the beginning. It's like the first
first
paragraph. So it says
Alright.
like neurolinguistics or linguistists, I can't say that, are concerned with how language is represented in the brain. So that you could kind of make the connection with the neural part. So it says advances in technology have increased our understanding of how the brain processes language. These are the kinds of questions that neurolinguistics attempt to answer. Where in the brain are first and second languages located? What are the ways that languages with differing characteristics are represented in the brain? Is there a critical period for second language acquisition? So and part of my set was to like, how might this inform your work as a educator or to teach English? So like, I just kind of had a hard time because like, I never really thought about what parts of your brain are activated when you're learning. So I was like, I don't know if I should have gotten very specific about it.
Yeah.
And so like I put down like, well, so I was thinking, well, maybe if we are aware, like, okay, so my sweet mate, she's a linguistics major, and she told me that the critical period to acquire second language better is when you is a younger age than when you're more of an adult. That kind of it's just easier, I guess, to acquire it when you're younger, and which I think makes sense because in the video, in the first part, what's his name? The doctor, he says that for adult, 95% of acquisition or more, that's how much you can learn, and 100% you acquire it as a child, 100% or something like that.
Yeah, I guess I took that, so she's like, I may have misunderstood it because I only watched it once, but I thought he was saying that like, as a kid, all the language you like can use is through acquisition, and as an adult, 95% of it is through acquisition and 5% is through actual learning. I got confused on what exactly those numbers were.
So like I kind of took that as a way, so as the critical period would be when you're a child at a younger, be a younger age. But like, I was thinking, okay, what part of the brain do we use when we use language? And apparently it's our left side of the brain. So I was thinking like, okay, how might we use this information as an educator? And I'm like, well, if we do activities and we know like, oh, if they think about this activity this way, then we know that this part of the brain is activated, which is more relevant to like their first, I don't know. So I was just
that's
wondering.
But it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, and so like I was just wondering if any of you at some point have to like ever considered this kind of thing, since I know you all are looking for W2 or something. I don't know if I don't know. It's just, I wasn't sure, so I feel like, well, maybe as a teacher we could do activities with the students that will use parts of the brains that like are relevant to. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if any of you like have an idea of.
I know this connects it, but I took psychology, and it was just saying how like you have like your long-term and your short-term memory, and then to like actually memorize something, you have to like repeat it 7 times until you actually get it. So I don't know if that. I mean, singing the ABCs with the kids, like, they'll eventually understand it, but is it just repetition?
Yeah, I guess another thing that made me think of is, like, how that contrasts with some stuff, I think, from last week, and talking about how, like, it's better to not separate language from the, like, subject matter and stuff, and how instead of, like, treating it like learning language is its own thing and it's separate from all these things, integrating them. And so I think that idea of, like if language is on the left side of your brain, like doing other activities use the left side of your brain to teach, like that totally makes sense.
Both? I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like multiple parts of the brain are going to be used in certain activities when you're using language.
Yeah.
So like, so I don't know. So I was just thinking that.
Yeah. I feel like this is a very short section in the book from what sounds
Yeah,
like really
it is.
complicated.
But it's like, I never really thought about that before until I had to like do that type of research for my part. And But yeah, maybe if you're all interested, maybe this could be one of those many questions because it says give an example of how these research questions might inform you. And I was like, well, I don't have a specific example. Then
Yeah.
if we create this activity, if we think about, I don't know, like the only thing that I'm thinking is like, okay, so if I were neurolinguistic and I did this activity with like 2 people, and I just make sure I keep track, like I have like some kind of technology that's showing me what parts of the brains that they're using to do this activity. I don't know, other than that, I'm not quite sure of how.
To make it clear.
Yeah, like to do this as an educator, because I don't know if as an educator for a teacher, how do we know,
Yeah.
like.
So do neurolinguists like look at like the brain side of language, and then social linguists look at like the
it says,
interactions and
it
stuff?
says, it says they're concerned with how language is represented in the brain. And all I could think of, and it says it mentions technology, so all I could think of is like, if you had like, let's say a machine over your head, then you do the activity, like, and let's say parts of your brain is activated, maybe the neurolinguistics would see which part of your brain is activated.
Yeah.
But like, how as educators, how do we, how, I don't know.
Yeah, I think they can have like, so I did like the next section of the book, I was like on theory and research, and so basically like the whole idea of that is there's your practice, your theory, your research, your theory, and your practice, and so it's like basically what it was saying is that theory should tie your research to your practice, and so like in like research, and like a neurolinguist might figure out like something from doing this, but that might not apply directly to your practice, but you like, because you need to form a theory with that, but then actually like then you have to put that into practice based on the theory, so it may not be like use the left side of your brain, but that might help inform things, because like he was talking about Krashen, I think that's how you say his name, he was saying how like he figured out like the natural, what's that called, you learn things in the same order, there's like a name for that, like the natural acquisition or something. Okay, it's like the idea that people learn language kind of in the same order. You would like get the morphemes in the same order regardless of like the language you're coming from or anything. There's like a natural order to it, and so when he like discovered that, he was basically like, oh, I could put this directly into practice, and if we just like made a grammar syllabus that was in the exact order of how people acquire language, that would work perfectly. But then that didn't actually work out perfectly, but he was able to use that research to create like his theory. Wow, that is loud. To create his theory that downplays like the direct teaching of grammar, and more it's just like people will acquire that naturally, and you don't need to teach that as much. And so I think maybe that might tie in with the neurolinguistic, like you may not use exact research to inform what you're doing, but that research could form a theory that could inform your practice.
Okay, I see.
Long answer to that question, but that's what I'm thinking.
Reflecting on your practices is what you said, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I had never thought of neurolinguistic.
Yeah, but see, I never thought of it either until like, this is interesting.
Yeah.
Did you like look up like what left and right has?
Well, I didn't really look up like go extensive into it, like, but I just like short term, like my experience was the one like, oh yeah, apparently like the left brain or something, but there's also this part of brain is like social, but it kind of overlaps. There's not really specific. So like, so it's kind of hard to explain. So it's but yeah, I just.
One way I thought in psych that they try to make you remember it's left is logic, right is random, and so kind of like your more creative, innovative part could be in your right, but then of course they all work together to figure stuff out. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. Wow.
There's so many questions.
Yeah, they are pretty loud.
For my part?
Just in general.
Or we can just choose any part of our parts. to ask questions?
Why not?
I mean, kind of right now.
Oh, okay.
Like,
I have another one, but I noticed that me and Orlando have the same one. It's for set 4, so I don't know, maybe, I don't know if I should ask you directly.
Just, you can ask the whole group and if,
Okay, so like part of it was, okay, so what is the output or interactionist approach? And it has like the person Swain and Van Leer. How does this extend to Krashen's approach? And if you were to place yourself in a particular camp, do you see yourself more as a nativist or interactionist?
okay,
Why?
I noticed on your
Involved
post,
I,
oh, sorry, what?
I was just noticing you had very involved questions for both of them.
yeah,
I noticed on your post that you put like, you can't answer this question at the moment, right? 'Cause
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
confused
so-
whether what you are. Basically it's just asking, are you a person that learns while they're explaining it to you, or a person that learns while interacting?
oh, okay. See,
So
that's-
I put interacting because I love to interact, and I think that's where I
Yeah,
learned the most.
okay.
When like, okay, this is how you do it. Okay, now your turn. Okay, instead of like lecturing someone's just.
Okay,
teaching
see,
it.
I looked up the terms, like I googled the definitions for these, and I was just even more confused. I was like, well, I'll
I'm a
ask someone.
native. Just like I'm a native.
But why? Okay,
I don't know if
So-
that makes sense.
Yeah.
so which one? So is the nativist Swain, and the interactionist Van Leer?
In a tea party.
Is that right?
Hmm?
interactionist,
Am I
Like
correct?
that sounds yeah.
yeah, that sounds pretty right.
Okay.
So,
So one is like more leaning towards that, the other one's leaning towards.
Did they say like which one has like proven to be better for teaching?
For
well,
teaching, I don't know if you, for teaching, basically, interacting, because it made an example with Van, I'm just calling him Van Leer.
mhm.
He made an example how like it only everything falls into different categories.
Yeah.
He made it the example of like a language class. The students in a French class, they were just being taught by lectures and just pretty much native. How do you say that? Just and at the end of the class, they didn't learn nothing of French. Like
Yeah.
they know like little words like hi, hello, bye. But he then noticed that once you start interacting, like this, when you make activities that the students have to interact and actually speak to each other in French, and actually instead of just listening to the teacher, he explained like that classroom the teacher were like 80% of the time just lecture. And
I'm a party man. We're not that fun.
and he said that as they did more interaction, they learned more, and at the end of the year, like they can actually speak French, and they actually like acquire more knowledge than just sitting there. But other classes, you have to sit there and listen. But other classes, like language learning classes, I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I feel like most classes you could make pretty interaction.
So this is like Van Leer's diagram. So
What page that?
132. So like it sets what Orlando was saying that like what he said that Van Leer claims that certain conditions are necessary for certain outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
A lot of like face-to-face learning
Yeah.
while just like listening and paying attention.
I mean, I get why like sometimes you'd have to be maybe
More of a nativist. I guess I'm trying to use this terminology.
but like I feel like most classrooms you could make really interaction.
I don't
Because
know.
like my math class is like so
Yeah.
group based, like, and that wasn't true in high school, but in like 381, 382, it's been like we sit at tables and like everything is group, and I've gotten so much more out of it because when I'm confused, I like ask my group, and because like it's I don't know, it's more intimidating to be like in front of the whole class, like I have no idea, but like in that group, it's like okay. So I feel like even classes that we think of that are like traditionally more nativist, I feel like you could make them pretty interactionist.
yeah, so I feel like we could use probably both, but I feel when you explain to me like interactions more like interacting with others to learn, I feel like that's how I learn better. So I guess to answer that second question is do you see yourself more as a nativist or interactionist? I would probably have to go with interactionist.
And what about you guys?
Yeah.
I'm definitely interactionist. I talk and like I also just I'm sure you've noticed I talk. But like, even like for my own learning, I remember I was taking like the AP Euro test, and I like literally taught my mom all of European history because I like definitely learned by talking. So it's like, Mom, it's gonna explain all of Europe history to you. So I feel like definitely interaction is.
It's an interaction too, like having the groups here and then like from the other class, like I've learned so much. And, like it's gadget, like it was just by yourself, so it's like ask a question, I'll just talk to her later, and I never do. It's just like I figure it out myself, and I never learn. So I like interacting better than.
You can do both?
Yeah, it's
Awesome.
like it depends on the subject a lot of the times, and cause 432 is super nice, and I've like liked learning, but then like when we got the midterm last week, it's like you start on your own and then you do it with people, and I'm like, there's too much overlap here, not everyone's in the same spot, what are we doing? And that was like, we should have just done this whole thing as a group activity, and that would have been, I think, better.
Yeah, now that I think about it, so I feel like I'm more of an interactionist, but like math classes, I feel like I'm both. Because, yeah, some of my classes, I just feel like it's just the teacher talking, but he also gives us the opportunity to discuss things and like to talk with like a partner or something. But I feel like, yeah.
I don't know if anybody read. I don't know if it was just me reading, but that, how I don't know who said that it's the best way to go is have a balance, an equal balance of both. I don't know who it was. I don't know if anybody taught.
Oh, I think I remember that somewhere. I can't remember where it was, but I think I remember reading
Yeah, like
that
it's better to
somewhere.
have an equal balance of both in a classroom instead of having too much of too much interactions.
Yeah. I see how since like getting into woodring and being in woodring classes, so many more of my classes have been interactionist. And like before that, I was in like really big lectures.
Yeah.
And like I did well because I have like my short-term memory is pretty good, and I'm pretty good at memorizing things. So I cram for a test and I do well, so I had good grades. But like I can't remember any of it. But like my classes in woodring have like all been group worked, and like and I don't know. I've heard people make the argument that like group work, like you're not gonna get as much the individual, and how do you know how that individual's doing? But like at least for me, since getting into woodring, I can recall so much more from all of my classes where I have been in groups like this, way more than like geology, where I'm like, there was a time that I could classify a bunch of rocks, and now I can tell you nothing.
Yeah.
Which is different. Makes sense.
I like having the students work by themselves and then later on just have them help each other type of thing.
Sorry, what was that?
Like when we start teaching, like having the kids like do the work by themselves and see what they can do, and then like if they have questions, like we can break into like another little session where we can all just help each other. They just help each other in a group.
First, so they can feel good. See, I feel like working, being more interactive, is like you keep like the kids feel more comfortable. At least I did when I was like smaller or younger. Like I feel more comfortable. Like I feel more, like you said, feel more comfortable at talking and communicating with my classmates that were the same age and sometimes having the same questions. And you guys figure it out. And if you guys, none of you guys know that you guys, like it's not you going up to the teacher or you talking. It's like 5 of you guys talking to the whole class.
Yeah.
And I think, and I don't know if it's just me seeing this, but I feel like more as we get like as time passes, the teachers are making it more like group activities in classrooms. I don't know if you've seen that, like when you go to elementary schools or middle school. Because I know when I was like elementary, it was all just a lot of teachers had like the mentality. It's like you're on yourself and you're gonna pass the test and nobody, your grade is only gonna depend on yourself and that's it. Like if you don't pass it, then you don't qualify to go to this class and go to that class. And I don't know if you guys noticed that.
Yeah,
I think I'm just like calling it.
I can see that really relating to like Vygotsky that we were talking about, and like the scaffolding, and how he's talking about like, you know, you want to be in that zone of proximal development, and you can have like support from students or teachers or whatever. And so I feel like that works really well with the interactionist model, just because like if you have them in a group, like in my math class at my table, I really like girls' math, so I keep reading them up. Like, but then sometimes one of us will really get something, and we're like, oh, I get this, and we explain it, and then the next thing, like, I'll be confused, and someone else will get it, and so that makes it so that I think we're all still getting a support we need, but it's like, you know, there's like one teacher, and there's like 16 of us in that class, so she wanders around, but she comes and answers the question if like
all of us are confused and don't get it, and then it's like something she's like, oh, we should probably go over this to the class, and that lets her clue in. But I think if it was just like work on your own, there'd be so many of us that weren't getting our questions answered because there's one of her, and we like typically we're all at least a little confused on something, and then kind of clue her in into what she needs to go over more as a whole class and what just individual students need. So I think it really works with that Gatsky model too. So I've used the bathroom so bad, I'm like talking really fast, so I'm gonna be right back.
Alrighty. So what do you guys want to talk about next?
Some teachers are
My
getting
back just popped like 4 times, that was disgusting.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Okay.
From my hometown, they're like high school, elementary kids.
Elementary?
Yeah, like
Really? Oh,
so they work at the Boys and Girls Club. Like I mentor like a group of kids, like all the staff do, and like we check up on them and make sure like they've read or they've done their homework, or like the first thing they do when they get there is do their homework. And they're like, oh no, I don't have homework. I was like, you have to have homework for like a kid. He's like, oh no, my teacher doesn't believe in them. Just like, where was this teacher when I was little?
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, is that like not having homework is like not what was I gonna take this into? Like,
Even in summers I had homework.
yeah, like those packets and stuff.
Yeah.
But
That's crazy.
yeah, I lost my.
That's alright.
I guess it's just us finding, as you as like a teacher and educator, what fits better for your class and your kids. Because obviously you're not gonna give like in the packet.
Too much.
Yeah, like but like I'm saying like if you're like an ELL teacher, you're not gonna give packets of just
Yeah.
English homework because
Yeah.
I feel like they're not gonna learn anything. They're just gonna get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Instead of obviously like that example of like having no homework for that class, and I feel like would be the best way. And it's when they're in the class, using every minute to work on them, like them specifically like speaking how to pronounce it, why does this sound this way, instead of just like
the more interaction in the classroom.
yeah, it just I guess it just depends on the classroom because obviously like in math classes you can't really be you can be interactive but like not too much because the teacher has to explain it, you know, has to take the time to. You're not just gonna learn something on your own and be like, oh okay. So I think it just depends on more about what do you see, what do you
More of the
observe.
content.
And you as an educator like know a little bit about like your subject and how you're gonna teach it to apply it. Do you have any other questions? ABC?
I only had those 2 questions.
Yeah, that's okay. That was set 2, and then we
Yeah.
talked a bit about
Set 4.
set 4 as well. Okay.
Yeah.
What did y'all have for set 3?
Was it how like acquisition just comes naturally to you? Something new?
Okay.
Like how I kind of got out of it.
Is that what? Okay, we all had different. Yeah.
Like learning is like.
For 3?
Mine was more about what is input hypothesis and explain comprehensible input and give an illustration of this approach that you would use in your classroom.
So that's like the opposite of the output then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Input.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mine was like moderate hypothesis, which is basically explain how you yourself moderate your learning.
Yeah, I heard the same.
Yo, you had the
Yeah.
same? Okay.
Oh, monitor?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
You
monitor.
said modern, I'm like.
No, moderate.
Okay.
And basically while you're learning,
So set 3.
yeah. I was just basically when you're learning to like you as a learner like you can use your brain and be like, okay, this sounds right, this doesn't sound right, okay, kind of like correct yourself in a way. But I mean, you gotta receive the skills right before you can even
Before you can even use it.
use it.
It was interesting because it was like it also asks like, how does this inhibit your learning and how does it advance it? And it gave a lot of examples of like people learning the second language and they like stop themselves from talking because they want to plan every single thing out before they actually say it, and then like they just end up not talking, and if you don't have any output then you're not learning as well. So it was just interesting examples. And then it's like, what role has monitor played in your learning? And for me, I think I was that kid a lot of the time. Like, I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to sound stupid. And I don't know if that had anything to do with, like, language in general or just who I was as a person. But I bet it also had to do with, like, what if I'm not going to say this right? And nowadays, I'll just say whatever I want. So probably a change.
Yeah. So does that kind of, like, along the same lines of, I can't remember if it was in part 1 or part 2 of the video, but he was talking about how, like, the difference between, like, acquisition and learning, and also like the fact that you need like no anxiety environment in order
I
for
think so.
like people to successfully learn a language. Because I would think like if that anxiety is part of the output, like if you have anxiety then you're not gonna have output and then you don't learn anything.
Right. Yeah, I think that all ties in. And so with like the anxiety, I had a part where it's like what are social and psychological factors that influence distance from acquisition of a second language, and definitely like attitude and motivation and culture shock were the 3 psychological ones. And they're like, well, if the person learning feels like not welcome in the environment, they're not going to want to speak it, they're not going to want to like risk putting any language out there. Or also what the attitude of the native speakers towards them is going to change their willingness to influence their acquisition of the second language.
Yeah, I had that same one for you for set 4. Interesting. I'm also kind of wondering if in that video, you know, he was talking about like learning versus acquisition. I'm pretty sure, didn't he refer to learning as kind of like your like filter to like what you acquire you can use, but then like what you learn is like you then like filter what you were saying.
It reminds me of what we're learning.
Yeah, those were.
Monitor thing.
I couldn't remember if that was just me smushing them together or if they both like actually talked about that.
No, I
Which one?
think
Monitor and
the
learning.
yeah. So he says what you learned is more like a monitor to make
Yeah.
sure what you're saying and acquired is correct.
I'm glad you got what I was going for out of that jumbled up mess of words.
That was also floating in my head as I learned this.
Great.
Yeah, definitely.
How do you think we go about like creating like low/no anxiety environment for students?
For students.
Is it a mud question?
Just knowing their interest and then relating it to the curriculum. That way, like they'll talk if like they're interested in the subject.
Yeah. Well, did you actually mind writing that down as like a muddy question?
Oh, you have it down.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't even see it
Okay.
right. You were so sneaky. Okay.
Just like strategies for helping create a low anxiety
Okay.
environment. But I would also think like maybe that group stuff we were talking about earlier, because like we're like
I don't know, I get less anxious about any question I have when it's in like a small group versus a whole class. So I think that same thing would apply for language. Like it'd be less intimidating to think you might make a mistake with English in front of a small group of people instead of like asking a question in front of the entire class. I would think maybe like group work could also be a good strategy.
I think so too. Yeah. It's like I feel like an answer that some people might have for this would be like, well, you have to research their culture and become more aware of differences, and that is important, I think, but also it's important to know that just because the student falls into the culture, their personal and home life is not going to be reflective of it exactly in the same way that everyone else within that culture is. And so it's important to like be aware of it, but also not generalize it and extend it to so many different people. And I think it's going to be interesting too, because like when I do think ELL students, I'm thinking of having to learn to Hispanic community, but I know that that's not the case, and I have to be very aware of that. Like, there's gonna be people from all over the world in our classrooms. You know.
Also, like, I thought it was interesting in that same one that we had, where we're talking about, like, social and psychological distance. So, like, I wrote down the page number because they gave really short explanations at the top. What page? I think it was like, it was one. That's set 3. Oh, it was page 118? Or wait, was that set 3 or was that set 4?
Yeah, set 3.
Yeah. And no, this is a lie.
Okay, it might be further back then.
So the 118 is why.
Yeah, don't go to 118. That was a lie.
So you're
I
trying
like described it.
to, are you in step 4?
I think
Oh, it's
on
126.
126.
It gives short explanations. So like
Oh, yeah.
on the page 126 is all the like social factors, and that creates like distance, and like they say that like the shorter that distance is, like the more like the easier it is for a student to become fluent in that language. And then there's also the psychological, is that what it's called? Yeah, psychological distance. But what I thought was like interesting is it talked about how psychological distance only seems to be important if social distance is like middle ground. So it's like if they have like really long social distance away, then like even if they have great like short psychological distance, that doesn't matter, they're still not going to be successful. Or if like the social distance is like closer to I'm gonna help words closer to the culture, I don't know if that's the right word, then psychological distance also doesn't seem to play a crucial role, but it's only if that social distance is like middle ground, then psychological distance plays a really important factor. So I thought that was interesting because I felt like these are more things that I would think about, like the psychological distance is more things that I would have thought about would like affect that success, like their motivation and attitude and culture shock, but then it turns out that's really secondary to all these other things.
So these social groups have certain kind of social distance? Each social group or what?
So it's like, so you have a student, like an ELL student, and there's 8 factors that influence this social distance, and it's social dominance. So it's like the power relationship between so like one group dominates another. That's like a far social distance. And integration pattern. So when there's little integration between the two cultures, that would be like a far social distance. Enclosure, when like the group itself is self-sufficient, so it like doesn't have to reach out to other areas. Cohesiveness, social distance is increased when the learner group is tight-knit, and social distance is reduced when the learner group is less united, which I also thought was an interesting concept. Size, when the learner group is big, there's more apt to be social distance from the target culture. A smaller learner group experience less social distance. And then cultural congruence, attitude, and intended length of residence. And I don't know, that was interesting to think about because I also think some of those systems would seem like support systems, like having that close group. And so those same things that I'm like, I would have thought of that as like maybe a positive. It's saying creates a farther social distance, which then apparently makes it harder for that student to like be successful in learning the language. And the psychological distance that it said was secondary is things that like, it's like the attitude and culture shock and motivation, and those are things that like I definitely, someone was like, what factors are important? Like those are things I would have initially thought of, but those are secondary. So I don't have a question, I'm just like, thoughts on that?
Right.
Okay, I'm just trying to grasp this. So let's do a table.
Alrighty.
Alright, so you said it has a middle ground, right? So here, this is terrible. Here's the middle ground. And then here you have, what was the first one?
I'm gonna film you because it seems like it'd be interesting.
You have the psychological distance, the social one.
Yep.
Okay, so
Wait, how do I flip you?
if we were to draw,
I can't.
if we were to draw this as a segment and this one as another one, right?
Yeah.
So you're saying that this one increases and it makes it, what happens to this one? If this one,
Psychological distance is secondary to social. So
So-
social distance is high, then psychological distance doesn't matter. If
So-
social distance is low, psychological distance doesn't really matter. If social distance is somewhere in the middle, then psychological distance plays a very important role.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we just imagine, so if we had this as the segment from A to B, right?
'Kay.
That's the social, which this
I wish I had a better
entire
pen.
marker. And so you're saying, let's say this was like a very long,
Okay.
so then the psychological one, regardless of its size, or if it's small,
Mhm.
or if it's long, it won't matter if this is,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, okay.
Did you understand that the same way that I did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. And also, if social distance is really small, then psychological distance also doesn't matter. So let's say we had point C that's like farther on that segment. But if it's somewhere around B, then it'd be.
So like 0 to infinity.
Yeah. But let's say we put social distance on a scale from like 1 to 100, and 100 is like there's very like they're close social distance, and 1 is like soup's far away, and so if it was like between 1 and 30, let's put that low, doesn't really matter. If it was between like 70 and 100, that's really high, doesn't really matter. But if it's in that like 30 to 70 range, then psychological distance is really important.
Interesting.
Yeah. I know, because I was like, psychological distance just seems like it'd be important. And that like awkward close-ups of me in our video, which is nice.
Being on the same
Yeah, I know, that's just like hard to think about in a classroom because I feel like some of these like social distance things are things that you have so little like ability to affect. And according to Schumann, they're really important. He's gotten like less attention because he doesn't really give direct things for how this should impact your teaching in a classroom. So like the question kind of asked us to think about how that might impact teaching, but he doesn't give any like direct classroom connections. So he's kind of like gotten less, not like less, I mean less attention maybe, I don't know. However, his theory has little to say about how teachers can plan instruction that would promote language acquisition. Perhaps for this reason, Schumann's theory of SLA has not led to specific methods of second language teaching. So it's kind of like, it's kind of been proven that his theory at least has some legitimacy to it, but not really what you do with that.
Yeah.
But you know, it's comforting.
Doesn't translate into. I mean, it translates into the lives of people and everything, but it doesn't give you instructions of like, oh, this is how you can affect everything. 'Cause it's a large societal not problem, of course, but like issue in the fact that it's not. You know, when people say issue as the issue itself, not
Yeah.
that it is an issue. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a large societal issue as that we don't have control over in the classroom.
And you can't get that control, but I wonder like what are some things you could do?
Mm.
Like if there are things you can do to help
Right.
with that social distance.
Like if you have a student that seems very socially distant, like what can you do?
To get into like that middle ground.
Yeah. Like is there something you can do?
I don't think there is. I mean, is there?
I don't know.
Can you like force a kid not to be themselves, like if that's who they are?
It feels like it's not impossible, but it's like.
It's not impossible,
But
obviously.
like how.
But like it's like you getting into it's
Yeah.
like when if you were a student, like you're a student, right? We're all students, and you like to go to class, show up with your laptop, do your thing, get your 100% on the exam, study, and do your own thing. And the teacher's like constantly just like, oh, you have to share, you have to talk to your groups, and you're just like, no, I just wanna listen to you, respect my own. Like, can you change that? If that's how you.
But I think like it's like in terms of learning language, I'm not sure that I think the idea is that if they don't have that social if their
Connection?
social distance is so great, then they won't be able
Oh, okay, it's talking
to
about
in terms of like
like
language.
having it or not
Yeah.
having it.
Yeah, in terms of like getting that like target language.
Like in order for
Schumann's
them-
analysis was that Alberto's social and psychological distance from speakers of the target language accounted for his lack of proficiency.
So in order for them to like even start to even
Yeah.
contribute to the learning, is they have to be like a kind of like in a certain kind of social.
As the Schumann's hypothesis is that the greater the social distance between two cultures, the greater the difficulty the learner will have in learning the second language. And conversely, the smaller the social distance, the greater the social solidarity between the two cultures, the better will be the language learning situation.
That makes,
Makes sense.
That makes completely sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, like, another thing I was thinking about, so part of my thing, I can't remember if this was an all section or it was just me section, but it was talking about acculturation. You guys read? So basically, I hadn't heard that terminology, so it's like, instead of assimilation, which, you know, the student, like, you're kind of forcing them into this American culture and they like lose their own culture. But acculturation was talking about being bicultural and just like being bilingual, like, and being able to like know how to interact and exist in both cultures, not losing their culture, but being able to work well in it. Because when I first read this, I was kind of like, I feel like if you were really intent on trying to shorten the social distance, I don't know if that's the thing you can do, but like if you were like really trying to, that seems like you would really be putting at a risk of like forcing assimilation onto a student and really getting rid of their culture. But the acculturation idea is you try to give them tools and help them, I guess it's like the classroom culture or whatever, but I'll not get rid of that native culture. What would that look like?
Wait, so just to kind of paraphrase, okay, to summarize what you just said. So you're going based on the acculturation.
Acculturation. It's a weird word. I might be saying it wrong. I don't know.
So you're saying that you think that the scale for the social thing, like if it's like if it's a small distance, you're saying that you feel like it's sort of assimilating, or is that like?
No, I guess what I'm
okay,
saying is when I first, because I read this part first before I read about the acculturation thing, and I guess when I read this and I was reading about like, you know, you want it to be super cohesive and you don't want a big difference between their culture and the school, like these are things that help us success. I was like, that sounds a lot like you're forcing them to get rid of this culture and assimilate to the culture. So that was kind of a concern I had when reading it.
Okay.
And then I read about the acculturation thing, and that, like, I don't know how you do that, but I would think maybe in this, if you could help a student be able to exist in both cultures, that could shorten the social distance without,
Maybe put in that middle ground.
yeah, and without, like, getting rid of their own culture, because I would be really nervous, like, going in and trying to be like, oh, we're gonna shorten this social distance, that I would just be like, get rid of your own culture, that's not what we want here.
Okay, I see.
We haven't hit set 5, right? Or have we?
Well, we bumped around a lot. Yeah, in order, so.
For
Would you
step
get-
5, I think this is the one where I didn't have a part, so.
Oh, you didn't have a part?
No.
Lucky. Just kidding. Jeez. What'd you guys get for set 5?
So I had language as a mental faculty, and basically that's like Chomsky's idea that language is like a built-in mental ability, and that people don't need to be taught specific grammar rules, they just need exposure to the language. And I put a quote in here, Krashen argues that knowledge of grammar can be used to monitor output, but that direct teaching of grammar has little or no effect on language acquisition.
That's cool, because mine kind of connects to that. It kind of talks about the overall, whether educators are doing justice to the kids for teaching them grammar and only grammar as like their first like 4 or 5 years of school. And I would talk about like 80% of like language teachers just teach grammar, and you're saying that has like little effect. And it also went on explaining how like it has little effect on the students, and it only causes like confusion.
Going based on that, on one of my parts, it was talking about how it was actually one of the terms I had to like look up, but it was saying that the language, or maybe it was earlier, I don't remember, but I just remember writing about like the language class, like their goal, it must have been in part 2 video, is to help you prepare for you to go to the outside world, because that's where you like learn the most output, so you could acquire the language better. So like the language class, like his example was like, oh, if you take a Spanish class to learn like basic information in Spanish, it's harder for you to acquire the language just taking Spanish classes, unless it's very grammar based, like I said.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were to travel to Mexico for like a summer, you'll acquire more of the language, because you'll you'll be practicing how to use it and stuff like that.
Be corrected into.
Yeah, like you just learn how to, I don't know. So like just kind of, that made me think of what you guys were just talking about. I don't know if that was part of the video, but
Yeah, no.
It was
Just like
was it? Okay.
other
I just
videos you
remember.
watch of the language.
Yeah, I just
Yeah, a whole
remember
bunch
that.
I watch. I hope just all the time.
just like instead of taking a class, just go to the country.
Yeah, so like the language, the goal of the language class is to help you
Yeah.
prepare for you to the outside world, which is where you get most of your output. That's kind of required.
But also, like, I remember him talking about how taking like a semester or 2 of
Yeah.
like Spanish, because if like I just went to Mexico knowing no Spanish, then I would just be confused and lost for a long time. But if I had a really basic understanding and I knew some grammar stuff,
And then
then I would have like, I could pick out some words and I'd be able to read things, and then I'd improve way faster than if you just like put me in Mexico and I figure it out.
Yeah. So that's, so like how you said, like language classes, if just grammar, then you probably won't remember much, but that's fine.
You've been quiet. What are your thoughts?
No, well, just my part, like identifying the parts of speech, like the nouns and verbs. I mean, that's what you learn like the first grades, right? Because like if we were learning like the verbs, like adding the ly and stuff to that, like I see why the kids wouldn't understand, because it's like I don't get it. Just the language structure. Because I was just thinking about it.
Like if you were to give me an English sentence and you told me to identify which is the noun, blah blah blah, I would not be able to do that. I don't know.
Remember in 432 when she was talking about how like there's so many but there's like so many rules that we like learn without everyone ever teaching us. Like you don't say like the blue big hat, you say the big blue hat, because size comes before color, but like no one had to teach you that size comes before color. You're just like the blue big hat, that sounds weird. It's the big blue hat, and there like technically is a rule that's like size comes before color, but no one has to. That's what I was like thinking about in a lot of this reading. Like when we were talking about that, like no one had to teach us that. It's just you heard it, and you figure it out, and then eventually you're like, no, you don't say the blue big hat.
It just like hooks onto you and it
Yeah.
becomes the way you speak. Yeah. It just goes again with the moderating your own.
Yeah.
Right. Alrighty. So we're like at 49.
Cool. I feel like we had a good discussion. Does anyone have any more thoughts?
It went pretty quick, right?
Yeah,
I feel like
that's quick.
Super quick. So I got 4 questions. So
Sweet.
I just posted
Great
them.
job, everyone.
Killing it.
Always.
Always.